And we are live. Hey everyone, it's Lev from Trotec Laser Canada. Welcome to everyone watching across the country and around the world. We have very special guest this week, Mr. Dave, Laser Dave Stevens from Trotec USA. So welcome.
Brief Thank you very much, Lev, for having me today.
Thank you for being here. And I guess we just want to do a quick intro for Dave. If you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, your experience with laser machines, with Trotec and so forth.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I've been in the laser industry since the year 2000, so just over 20 years now. Started with a company called Universal Laser. I've spent 30 to 40,000 operational hours running applications and test work for on every known consistent material on the planet.
Working. You having problems on the?
I've tested just about every kind of wavelength and style within our industry or type of material out there. I do a lot of the instructional videos, kind of become Laser Dave. And about 3 years ago, I started with a Trotec Laser. I have an inspiration and test lab here in Phoenix, Arizona now. And I am basically producing content, training, basically anything needed for the customers to thrive with their laser systems.
Awesome. And then, so I just want to tell everyone about the YouTube channel. So if you guys want to go to YouTube, type in Trotec USA, and then Dave has a whole bunch of awesome videos and content that he's producing, I guess almost daily now, just lots of great videos to choose from, tips, tricks, anything that you're mostly proud of, Dave?
Well, we just started to release my new Laser Hacks series. Our laser hack series are basically really quick little 1-2 minute tutorials that basically show you a quick and easy tip to improve your productivity, quality of your your processing of your laser, so that you can make yourself more efficient. You know, here's an example of just utilizing a rubber ball for doubling up your productivity on a rotary, for example. And I have almost 35 of these all lined up to be posted over every 2 weeks for the next until we're done with content.
Nice. That's awesome. That's awesome. No, lots of great videos. Again, thank you so much for spending the time to be with us. We really appreciate it. Okay, and then I guess you guys in the chat, if you have any questions as we go, we have a bunch of priority questions that we want to get to. And if you have priority questions that you want to make sure that we answer, go to bit.ly/asktrotec, and we'll get started. So our first question, I'm just going to grab from who. It's from Dawn out of Matlock in the UK. When cutting laser ply, I often get a lot of carbon blackening on the underside of the wood. Can you please give me some tips on how to avoid this? So who's been, I guess everyone here has been using wood since they started using lasers. I mean, any advice for...
What machine is he using? What machine is he using?
He is using a Speedy 100.
Aha. Okay. Yeah.
That makes sense then.
Yeah.
Makes sense? Is it not powerful enough? Is it?
It's too. Go ahead, Mike. No, Mikey, you go. You start us off.
I'll start. Well, there's no downdraft on the table, right? That's part of the problem. So the smoke is getting settled underneath. It doesn't say what thickness of the material is. Does he say the thickness or?
No, but can you give us like a rough idea of the thicknesses that you want to cut versus the ones that might give you too much charcoaling?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't cut probably any more than 6 millimeter on the Speedy 100. I'd be running at 1,000 hertz. Again, I think we talked about that last week. So you get your highest peak power. So you're not getting as black edge. I mean, it also it's laser ply, so I'm thinking it's half decent, plywood. It's not from Home Depot, it's not from one of those big box stores where typically you buy fairly cheap plywood.
Oh, Mike got stuck a little bit.
But the other thing is make sure you're using the least amount of power you can get away with. You may want to raise the material off the cutting table a little bit with some spacers. That might fix a little bit of that, but maybe just so you get some airflow going underneath the the table itself. So maybe
it
raise
could also
up.
be caused from on the Speedy 300 and 100. It could be reflection as well, because they have the stainless steel bed underneath the honeycomb. If you're using too much power, the power can reflect off the bed and flash back up at the bottom of the piece. And so that blackness you're getting on the bottom is quite often reflective burning from the too much laser power coming through. So you might want to turn your laser power down, or what I like to do is put a piece of black anodized aluminum underneath the honeycomb table. This absorbs the laser energy and doesn't allow it to reflect back. So that's a good little hack there as well.
Cool. Dave, do you have anything to add? I mean, have you got it?
No, I've experienced all that. The other thing that I run into is if you get buildup of residue in your cutting table over years and years of use, that can actually make it worse because it's causing smoke and buildup from the heat of that laser system hitting old wood residue, and that causes more residue. So clean your cutting table. I suggest on the honeycomb grid, it's just take in a spray oven cleaner on it every couple months or so, and then let it foam up for a few minutes, and then hose it off. That kind of takes the grit and grime off of it. It's kind of designed for it to clean ovens, and so that it kind of reduces the amount of residue built up in that honeycomb, which then reduces the amount of carbon on the back of your material.
Would it be just like cleaning an oven, just leaving it on for a couple of hours, then washing it off?
Yeah. Not too long, because I found it actually will take the anodization off of rulers, but but it really does a good job in taking that carbon and creosote off of the components, because that's kind of what it's designed for, to take off baked grit and carbon-based components.
Awesome. Stephen, I remember you were telling me in South Africa you guys used to do metal type of cleaning solutions to clean honeycomb tables. Do you remember? How did you guys?
It was engine degreaser.
Engine degreaser.
Engine degreaser, yeah. Engine degreaser. Yeah.
And would you leave it also for a couple of hours on that?
Again, not too long. So it's pretty much and obviously anything acoustic based, you got to worry about the aluminum as well. So you get oven cleaners that are acoustic based and not acoustic based. So with the one acoustic, you want to be extra careful, or possibly avoid, I suppose.
Yeah, it's pretty thin material, so it can break down pretty quickly. So
yeah,
be careful.
Actually, speaking of honeycomb, so we have our next question from Rangarari, I think I'm pronouncing it right, from Durban, South Africa, one of your countrymen, Stephen, asking how to best protect my honeycomb from warping. Anybody wants to tackle that as advice, or maybe explain why does it warp in the first place?
Well, like Mike was saying, it's a very thin material. And when you buy it new, it's nice and flat. And over time, inherently, it is going to deteriorate inherently, no matter how good you look after it. But one of the things I've seen, and it is crazy, but I've had customers putting their rotary attachments on those things. That's the first thing you're going to do to stop messing up your rotary attachment, your cutting table, is your rotary attachment must be on the actual laser bed, not on the honeycomb table. And then obviously cleaning it regularly, and that's not going to stop it from warping, but if there's a lot of residue on the bed, you're going to try harder with that to get things to work, and so that's going to cause some warping too. I don't know, it's difficult to say preventing it from warping. It's hard, but if you're going to start cutting a lot of MDF, it's going to warp a lot sooner. The more heat you put on there, and the more residue and build up, and the more miniature fires that you have, that bed's going to take more of a strain. So personally, MDF, I prefer to elevate off the bed and not use the honeycomb for that purpose. So if you're using MDF, that's going to be the surefire way to stop messing up the table, is to stop cutting MDF on the honeycomb table. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know this, but do you ever recommend to have a multiple cutting tables in case one goes through, like a second honeycomb table, for example?
Well, we're rotating them, but there's two honeycomb tables. There's the one that's got the 6 millimeter frequency, and that one's it's more durable because it's stiffer. So for your heavier jobs, I would use the one that has a 6 millimeter honeycomb as opposed to the 12 millimeter honeycomb. Yeah, that's what I would do. And
honeycomb tables are consumables. I mean,
exactly.
We do need to replace them every now and then. It's not something you keep forever.
Yeah, I'm curious what kind of machine they're using, because on the Speedy 100, the frame on the Honeycomb tabletop is quite rigid, right?
It's very
That's why
good. Yeah.
you got reinforcement at the bottom.
They're using a Speedy 100R, and it's 120 watts.
Yeah, so that should be a reinforced frame on the Honeycomb there. Maybe the way you store it sometimes, make sure that it's on the flat surface and put something heavy on the top. Well, I mean, equal distribution of weight there.
You sure it's 120 watts, Lev?
That's what they put in the registration form.
The
Yeah,
100R would be normally
120
30
volts,
watts,
perhaps.
120 volts, but yeah,
I didn't think you could do that with
normally an R is
PD 100.
Okay.
60 watts is normally your maximum. So
We got Roy asking, can you store the Honeycomb between two heavy pieces of wood for overnight storage to help keep it from warping?
Never done it.
well, I think most of it is just heat stress, right? So
yeah, that's
you
what I'm
know,
going to say. It's mostly temperature
Yeah.
influence. So maybe
I have to say
yeah,
that
it's not.
in my experience, I've never had a Honeycomb Warp because I always take care of them. I've never come across this once. I've never even talked to a customer that comes across of it. I mean, when you do get a lot of heat and build up over time, I mean, as long as you take care of it, you keep it clean, you don't have a lot of heat build up underneath of it, which constantly causes the stress to the Honeycomb. If you take care of it properly, you clean it on time, you elevate your material, you should never have this problem. So,
And how often would you elevate
Yeah.
the material?
it really depends on what material I'm working with. I have a laser hack coming out where I actually cut little pins that slide perfectly into the Honeycomb grid. I call them little like T's, and so they look like the shape of the letter T, and they slide down into the groove. They give you a perfect elevation and orientation, so you can always place the product in the same part. Especially if you get a lot of flare up and flame behind the materials, like thicker materials, acrylics. As well as like MDFs and stuff that tend to build up a lot of heat underneath of it. If you got high wattage and you're cutting really, really dense materials that tend to produce a lot of flare up, that's when you're going to have problems. It's the stress of heat that's going to cause warping. And if you take care of it properly, this shouldn't happen.
Yeah, it shouldn't. And we talked about this last week too. Is that you only use the cutting table for cutting. As Steven said before, you don't put your rotary table on top of the Honeycomb cutting table. You don't put plaques on top of there. You don't put granite. If you're doing something, if you're just engraving, then you take the table out of the machine and work off the solid table. It's very important because a lot of times people accidentally drop things on that table, and then once you dent it, you're really SOL in that spot. So only time you use the tables for cutting, when you're engraving, you take the table out and you just work on the solid table.
Now, the vector grid is too. I mean, if you have a bigger machine, the vector grids are a lot more durable and don't tend to have these problems. So, that's not as important of doing that. It's only the Honeycomb, which tend to be a lot more sensitive to dings and breaks and warping and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Perfect. We lost Steven for a sec, but he's going to be right back. We got a question from Stefan. Does the glue in the MDF, is it recyclable?
Because of the glue, is MDF recyclable?
Because of the glue, yeah.
I've never seen a place that recycles MDF. I mean, when going to the landfill and the recycle depot for other projects, not laser involved, there's never a place to put MDF. That always has to go in the general trash, into the landfill. I don't know. I don't know about where Stefan is. I think he's from Quebec, isn't he?
He's Quebec, yeah.
I think there might be something different there, but I don't think MDF's recyclable.
It is not.
No.
It is not due to that. It's the resins they use inside of it, basically, and it's compressed with pressure and heat, and it basically, in essence, turns it into a non-recyclable material because MDF is inherently already been recycled. That's what it's made from.
Exactly. And I'm from BC, and so we actually know recycling here. It's like martial law on the recycling out here in BC.
We got a question from,
I know we used to sell I was going to say, I know we used to sell a material, bamboo material that was clean, didn't have any bad formaldehyde or anything in it. So you might be able to find some other products that maybe be green, and then therefore they may not have that same issue. So just as a food for thought. So
yeah.
We got a question from Elena. Is it possible to put 1 millimeter aluminum plate with holes on a honeycomb table as a vacuum for cutting thin materials?
I can take that.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good idea if you have the ability to, of course, cut aluminum. As long as you cover up your vector grid, if you have a downdraft on your laser system. So you, of course, have to have the downdraft on a system that supports that. But yes, as long as you cover the excess portions of your cutting table, honeycomb or the vector grid up, and you have a downdraft vacuum table, then yes, it will create a vacuum in those spots. I use things as simple as transfer tape to do the same thing. Place it over the whole field, cut an area, and then that open area becomes a vacuum. Whether you're using aluminum, wood, tape, really cardboard, all that will create a vacuum table, therefore producing the most vacuum in that location where the hole has been cut. As long as you don't have too many holes cut, and they all have to be filled up with some product in order to get the full vacuum effect.
Yeah. Just remember that when you are closing off the whole bed, that you don't leave it closed off for a long time, because that, like sometimes, like when you're cutting, then you start getting air. But if you close off the whole bed and you leave it for half an hour for whatever reason, you go to the phone or whatever, now you've got your exhaust drawing through the table, and it's very hard on the exhaust. So a lot of times we may leave a little slit there or something like that, just to allow some of the air to be flowing through to your exhaust. So
especially on a cheap exhaust, like what you'd buy from like a overseas exhaust. You've spent the $40,000 on your laser and the $200 on your exhaust system. Those exhaust systems are not meant to give you constant downdraft. You're going to cavitate that exhaust terribly, and then that's really bad for the motors and the bearings. Everything starts to kind of get warm, and they're not. They don't like that. Use a Trotec exhaust. Shameless self-promotion.
Well, actually, hold on. Sorry, this is the question I was going for. Speaking of exhausts, we have a question from Sheldon from Prague in the Czech Republic. This is a longer question. I couldn't post all of it. We're a school redoing our makerspace. Our struggle is with ventilation. There's a little bit more. Struggle with ventilation. We'd love to vent it outside, but it's a long run, 100 meters minimum. 10 meters minimum. Our experience with standalone filters like the Atmos Mono Plus is that they're really loud. Can you discuss pros and cons of your vent exhaust fan solution versus Atmos solutions with the Speedy 100? So in Canada, we actually use Quattro filters, but most of the world they're using Atmos. So it's good that we have Dave here, because I know that you guys use Atmos in the States. Can you perhaps comment on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I've not found that they are that loud. Yes, I mean, most exhausts if you were to put any exhaust near the machine, you've got that motor, it's going to be, you're going to have some sound. And any standalone filtration unit all sound about the same, because they have to produce enough air through them. 10 meters is not that far for externally exhausting, as long as you do it correctly. You want to, of course, have the right size of ducting. It is definitely going to be the most cost effective. And whenever you externally exhaust a unit, you want to make sure to put your exhaust blower at the very end of the line. So, of course, that noise is going to go away. So, and it's also pulling the entire process. You never, ever want to put it right at the back of the machine and have it push. The reason is for safety, so that you don't have potentially blowing, you're pushing the debris instead of pulling it. And if there's any opening in your ducting, you're basically pushing contaminated dust into your atmosphere. So always put it at the end of the line, so it's the quietest. Atmos units, filter units in general, are going to have a little bit of sound if it's in like a classroom or something. In your case, yes, unfortunately, that's going to be a side effect. If it's a carpeted room, it's going to be a little bit better. But in your case, 10 meters is not that far, believe it or not. and you should have no problem ducting it to an outside. It's going to save you some money. It's going to keep the sound down. And you just want to make sure to do a large enough ducting pipe. Make sure you put it at the end, hook a switch to it. And it sounds like that would solve your needs all the way through and through.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the bigger pipe will definitely help too. So normally, like, not go with a 4-inch, maybe go with a 6-inch. And then you've got less restriction on the pipe, and then the air will draw with less friction, and it'll be able to pull it farther. And certainly putting on again, as Dave said, you know, easier to pull air than it is to push air. So, and putting the exhaust at the end is good for 2 reasons. One, it's quiet, and 2, it pulls the air very easily. So a lot better than pushing. So.
Legally in the U.S., you can't push, because if it goes through your atmosphere, and if there's one leak in that ducting system, it's pushing contaminated air. So
all positive,
you have to put it. It has to be all pull. It needs to be vacuum, not push. And so many people will make that mistake. That's why I wanted to kind of bring that up, because they're like, well, it's still noisy because I put my blower right behind my laser. So, you know, it fixes the sound, and so many will make that mistake of putting it right there. But for your own safety, make sure you put it at the end of the line.
And what about, I don't know, we were discussing this, I think with Mike some time back, like if it's a school, can they make like a hole in the wall and put the filter on the other side? Like if it's in a different room, is that a possibility?
Yeah. Of course, if they can put a hole in the wall, I mean, I typically recommend customers put it outside. They can buy weatherproof blower units, or they can put them under a drip cover or something like that. But this way, it's quiet. It's under an eave, or they'll put it up in an attic right on the outside wall. So they're still on the inside, but then they only push a few, a meter or so to the outside port, and so 98% of the ducting is being pulled.
Yeah, just make sure that if you do put it outside and you put a box around it, or even if you put a box inside, you have a large box and you have the ability to pull a lot of air into that box. Because, you know, I've had some people where they put the box outside, the box hasn't been big enough, or they haven't been able to draw enough air into the box, and then that affects what they can pull out of the machine, and it also affects the exhaust itself. So
it'll overheat.
You know, make sure it'll overheat, and you'll have a problem very quickly. So
Aaron was saying, be careful with the heat air exchange when venting outside. You can only move as much air outside as you can return inside, as you need to reheat or cool that air.
Makeup air is very important, especially when you have 2 or 3 horsepower exhaust fans. You can start to cavitate the actual room a little bit, but you have to have some kind of manifold back into your room, whether it's from the outdoors. But be careful if you're above the Arctic Circle or something like this, like say Edmonton or something like that. When you have makeup air coming from outside in the middle of winter, you've got -40 makeup air coming back into your house. So you've spent all this money heating your nice warm house, and turn your laser on with your external exhaust, and suddenly that nice warm air gets pushed out of your house, made up by -40 air, and now you've got to pay even more to heat the air. So in situations like that, I always recommend a exhaust filter, just so that you're keeping your space warm.
I've had one example where somebody put custom ducting into the underneath of their laser system, where the air enters the laser, and that came from outside, so it went through the laser and then went back outside in a cold environment. But requires some ingenuity to rig something like that up, but that could work too.
Yeah.
Perfect. Next question is from Phil out of Kelowna, BC. My operator left the company. What is the best way to get training for a new operator?
Hire James.
Tro Academy.
Tro Academy. Yeah.
Tro Academy is number one.
Dave, how do you guys do training in the States for new users, or can you recommend anything here?
I mean, ultimately, it comes down to the regionals. The guy in that area typically will be responsible for training that person, and they will typically give their local sales guy that did the initial training a call, and then they'll schedule something, arrange training or something like that. If it's repeated over and over again, sometimes there will be cost involved in that case. So they can't keep retraining the same location over and over again for free. But so there may be a cost involved in doing that. But typically, find your local person that typically installed or trained you initially, and then set up something to do it again. That's really all there is to it.
Yeah, and what we do with new user training, we offer web training right now, and
that's true.
That training gets recorded, so then they can reshare it with an operator. Or if you're looking for additional paid training with Trotec Canada, we do record it, so then you can reuse it over and over again for
they should users. Lev, they should be cross-training their staff as well. You can't have just one person like knowing how to operate the laser. So if that's person is indisposed, at least someone else can do it, right?
How much would the owner need to know? Like, if it's let's say if it's a sign shop and they got the UV printers and large format printing machines, how much of that would the owner need to know?
I think 100%. You should know everything if that's your business. Mm-hmm.
If it was my business, I would know it as well as any operator.
Yeah,
that's just me personally.
That's a good point.
Yeah, sometimes it's a bit difficult depending on how much material, how much machinery you have. But
that's true.
You certainly want to have. I mean, I talked to Brian yesterday from Fast Signs, and I mean, he was asking me about plastics and things like that, and he said to me, my operator knows a lot more than I do, and he certainly had said that he needed to know a little bit more information about the machine itself, which he didn't know. Just because it didn't contribute as much as maybe the other machines did to the business, right? So, but you're right. I mean, certainly if you can have basic knowledge, it's good. So my suggestion to people is get a video camera and tape your training session with whoever comes in, right? Have questions already made up of what you want to do, what you want to accomplish. And then videotape it. And as Lev said, if we do the nice thing about the online ones, it's recorded. But a lot of times, the questions that get asked are based on what you're working with, and those questions are answered at that time. So if you have a video camera, then at least you can go back on it and take a look at it later on. And then you can use it in situations where you do lose your operator and you have to hire somebody new. So
yeah, most of the physical work is very easy to train. It's sort of the job control, printer driver, graphics program stuff that really confounds a lot of people. If you sat and watched the machine a lot, you kind of know how to press the button, how to focus. It's the pre-engraving stage that's really critical to a lot of people, and I think that's where Tro Academy can really shine and help everybody, is because we can hook you up via this kind of a video chat, sharing screens back and forth, chatting at the same time. You can share video, you can see you can see our screen, we can see your screen, you can see our laser, we can see yours, and at that point we can train you directly, or our academy anyway can train you directly. And as Lev said, we record that video so that you can save it on your own hard drive and watch it at any point.
Yeah, we do training we can have up to 6 people like this join the training. So if you have multiple locations, if it's bigger companies with multiple branches, we can definitely train multiple branches at the same time. Stephen, I mean, you worked at South Africa for a long time as tech director. I mean, what kind of training did you guys? I mean, was it similar to Canada and the US out in South Africa as far as training for operators?
No, it was different.
What did you guys do down there?
We typically gave the customer 2 days of training, and it was almost always on site, so either at the customer's premises or the customer would come and visit us in our showroom. It wasn't 2 consecutive days. It was 2 days they could take at their leisure, one day and then maybe a few weeks later another day, just to not flood them. But it's a different market there. and it.
Well, it's certainly smaller than the US.
I was just correct you there, Lev. Tech manager, not director.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's with South Africa. I mean, you could drive how many offices did you guys have there?
We had Johannesburg, Cape Town, and a small office in Durban. So Durban, 6-7 hour drive. Cape Town, not typically driven. You can fly there, but hour and a half, hour 45, you're there.
Yeah,
so it's a smaller market.
Ontario alone is like the size of Europe, so that's a little different. We got a couple of good questions here. Is it possible to cut float glass with Trotec laser? I don't know what float glass is. I don't know if anybody does or can explain. Okay.
No idea what a float glass is.
Well, I mean, what about general glass? Can the laser
General glass? No.
No, absolutely not.
Just for it'll start charting and.
You can score the glass, and then I've had people with stained glass. I think we might have gone through that. Where they'll score the glass with the laser with a cut, and then they'll go in with their pliers after and then break the glass.
I've done that.
That's all I've ever seen. Yeah.
Just be careful. Put a masking tape on it. Make sure you're not hurting yourself, right?
A traditional hand glass cutter does far better than the laser could ever do, in my experience. The only time I've been able to successfully cut glass is heating it up just below its melting temperature and then cutting it with a high wattage laser very slow and then annealing it slowly over the period of about 18 hours. Not practical.
Not practical, no.
Yeah.
Are those glass cutters usually, expensive, or I mean, generally speaking?
Well, a handheld glass cutter costs you a few dollars.
Oh, really?
Yeah, exactly. Just like a scoring knife.
It's just a little. It's basically a little tiny wheel with a diamond blade on it, and then you go through it, and it scores it, and then it snaps. It only takes seconds. It's only you can pick them up for like $15.
And what kind of thicknesses of glass can they
I mean, my mother-in-law is a glass artist, so she does it daily. And I've seen her score and break glass up to 6 millimeter.
Wow. I really like this question. What's the weirdest thing you have ever engraved? Who wants to go first?
Hey, James, you might want to start.
Me? I would
yourself.
Yeah.
No, we can't say it.
I have a good one actually.
While you guys are
Mike and James.
I'll let Dave. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Dave.
I would say the strangest thing I ever engraved was a seed pod. It was a large bean pod that I engraved a photo into and then stuck it in the ground and then grew it. And then my photo came out of the ground.
What?
True story.
What?
How does that happen?
It was a large seed pod, and then you would laser pulse through the husk of the outside of the seed. And then and then you stick it in the ground, and then it would come out. And the goal was to where you could grow your message. So it would say, will you marry me? Or, I love you or something. And I took it a step further and literally grew my photograph. And so the outer to the husk comes out of the ground. And as it comes up, that message is on that outer component as it comes up with the leaves coming out.
Do you have any photos or videos of that? That'll be interesting.
I don't know. I did that back in my old days, probably 15 years ago. So,
well,
back
Mike's
then it
got
was proprietary and a hush hush, but that's long old news now.
Wow.
No, whose customer is it? They're laser marking on sex toys. That's pretty weird.
Well, the best one was the lady came in and she was laser. He wanted a laser engrave of the vibrator, so I did some samples for my best, my BFF and all that. So the best one was she came back and said, I can't afford the machine. She said, do you have somebody that can do the work for me? So I knew where she was, and I had a customer there, was a good guy, and he was looking for some extra business. So I sent her over, and she actually didn't talk to him. She talked to the owner's mother. So
I don't know.
I didn't forewarn him.
I don't know if it's weirder than photographs on bean pods, though.
Well, I did photographs on bread.
So did you take some samples, Mike?
Food is always always a fun one.
Food's always a good one, yeah.
Food, yeah.
Yeah.
James, I don't know if you remember these guys, the denture clinics. I mean,
yes. Oh yeah, I remember them well. They're fantastic.
So they're actually one of our customers, Northern Lights. Where are they out of Prince?
Prince George, man. That's where we're welcome.
The
Yeah,
denture hub of Canada.
The denture hub, yeah. Esther Schwenning, she's fantastic.
Yeah,
she's absolutely
sink your
amazing.
teeth into that one.
If she's watching, I'd like to thank her for the sample she sent us a year ago.
Is that the city that discouraged you to brush your teeth?
Yeah, because I want a shiny new set of these things.
Yeah, so what they do, they actually engrave into the dentures, and then they put acrylic paint, and then as you can see, they put it in the pressure cooker and then sand it off, and then you get a permanent marking with the person's last name and I guess the expiry date of the dentures right on. I'm gonna just freeze frame it there. Oh, there's Esther.
Hi, Esther.
Yeah. So, and she was saying, if you watch the video, she's saying that they found that solution because a lot of the denture clinics they get lost in senior homes and or stolen or broken or whatever.
Yeah.
So this way, it's a permanent marking.
They actually. The standard way of doing them before lasers was they would put a slip of paper in and then shellac over it. But the over time when you're eating prune husks and things like this, that shellac wears out, and then the water gets into the paper and it gets all punky and holds bacteria. So this actually is completely bacteria free.
Wow.
Yeah.
Stephen, do you remember any weird stuff that you guys did in South Africa?
Well, considering the curio market for wildlife in South Africa, I leave that to your imagination. But ostrich eggs, anything game related, I've engraved on. As bad as that smells, ostrich eggs smell quite bad.
Antlers are the worst.
But one of the things I did have to work with, it was pericardium, which is a medical application. It's for the heart. And a customer was looking at cutting this section of the heart, and which is called the pericardium.
Yeah.
It wasn't human that we were working with. It was bovine pericardium. It was animal pericardium. But that was interesting to work with. I'd say that's the weirdest I've had to work with because it's a body part, right? And living, technically a living body part. So and that also had a interesting smell.
What
I
kind
do
of
lobster tails too. So
yeah, no, that wasn't a mark. We were cutting it because they were. I don't know how. Yeah, cutting it into shapes that you would. I don't know what these surgeons would do with it. Insert it somewhere in the heart cavity. I'm not too sure what it was for. I was just the person tweaking the settings. But so I'd say that was the weirdest.
Wow.
I don't think it worked out though.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. Somebody's actually gonna engrave their dentures, their mom's dentures. Thanks, Aaron. We got a question from Danny. Any do's and don'ts for installing the vision camera system? I have a PDF printout. Just wondering if there's anything specific to look for.
well, make sure it's in RGB mode because the original one we got was in CMYK. Would be the one thing I would suggest.
1,000
Make
DPI.
sure that 1,000 DPI. Make sure your camera's calibrated. Run the calibration. Takes a couple of seconds to do it, but make sure you run it. So,
do they mean installing like they don't have one, they ordered one, got all the parts and want to put it in, or installing as in putting it in and taking it in and out of the system? That I'm not sure.
Well, we could talk about both, but I guess general tips for vision camera system that the black dots have to be RGB and what 1/4 inch, and there's a whole
hairline around it.
Yeah, hairline around it, and at least 3 dots around the object, as I remember. Anything else you guys could think of?
No.
Well,
make sure it's calibrated and
make sure it's calibrated. Yeah. Make sure that I guess the one thing about the dots is depending on what you're looking for. Like if you put your material in and it's relatively straight, then you don't need as many dots. But again, if it's turned, you might need more dots. So it might be something to experiment a little bit with. I guess.
Yeah.
So also depends on what you're putting the dots on. I've done sublimated fabric, and that requires a lot more dots because of the stretching after you heat the material. So you're going to need more dots on there to be able to do proper math. Yeah, it doesn't have to be 1/4 inch, but normally we suggest 1/4 inch for
no larger,
make sure you.
It tends to start having problems if you go larger. I have gone down to much smaller, but yeah, anything around 6 millimeters seems to be the best, most consistent in my experience.
6 millimeters is about the best.
Danny says he ordered the parts and the installation. He wants to know about the installation on the machine.
Oh gosh, you're gonna have to talk to the tech.
I've actually never done that installation. That's one installation
I've done it 3 times, and it's about an hour of work, and you need to follow it exactly, depending on which model it is. If it's the 400, it's pretty easy. The 360 can get a little hairy because it's tight in there. But that is one that I would suggest that possibly doing a FaceTime chat with a service tech. Go through it as far as you can. If you're not technically savvy, even have a tech come out and do it.
Yeah, the new 360s and 400 are pre-wired.
Yes,
the new pre-wired. Yeah. Just remember too. Sorry, Lev. Just remember on the when you're using the vision camera that you can snap the. If you have the red dot pointer, you can snap the artwork, your registration mark to the red dot pointer, and then when you're putting your artwork in, you can line it up with the red dot pointer, and then when you go to find the next set of dots on the next piece you're putting in there, it's going to be a lot faster. So just remember that to do that, because that's certainly a. Once I found out about that tip, it was a lot easier when you were doing multiple pieces of your parts. So make sure that you do that.
Yeah, because you can snap to corners and you can snap to center. But what Mike's saying is that every one of those fiducials or those little registration dots, you can snap to those too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So if you
just make sure to select the center of one of your registration points.
Sorry, Dave, say that again?
Exactly.
I said just make sure to select the center of which registration points with your mouse, and then drag it to the cursor on your screen where the red pointer is, and it'll snap perfectly. So the red pointer will know exactly where that first registration point is, then the rest will be found.
Yeah, it's be a lot quicker. Yeah, it's a really neat system they've got there. So
yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I've never used one that's better.
Yeah, we got an answer for that. What's the weirdest thing you've engraved from Jazer from Belgium? I pulled that up. So engraving.
Nice.
Yeah, look at that.
That's beauty.
That's very cool from Belgium. Okay, we'll keep going. 1 second. So this question is from Clint from New York, New York. When will your software be fully compatible with Mac iOS? So we're actually in the process of doing beta testing for new software that is going to be web-based. There's not a whole lot I can actively say at this point, but it will be accessible with any computer, any machine. I know we've been getting those questions for a long time, but that's coming down the pipeline. So we can't give you firm dates or anything like that at this point, but that is coming from Trotec, so just watch out for that. Next question we have from Jamie out of Petersfield in the UK with the Trotec 140 watt. What is the best way to approach potential customers between B2C and B2B for engraving products over printed? I'll let that sink in for a second before anybody wants to answer. I guess printed UV printing or any kind of print products. Go ahead.
I guess maybe if you think of UV printing I mean, the one nice thing that we have in the laser engraving business is the perceived value of a laser engraved product has high value. So when you say to somebody that it's laser engraved, everybody goes, wow, that's really neat. And I think that's very, very, very important that you promote that because a lot of people think that the laser creates a lot of value in the fact that that product's been laser engraved. I mean, Apple pushes a lot of laser engraved product out their doors just for that reason, and I think that's certainly one way of it's just that it has that connotation behind it that it's special, and that's certainly something when you're talking to potential customers that you try to convey to them, that you're not just making a mark on a product, you're laser engraving that mark. And I think that really that connotation has saleability to it, and I think that's something that you always convey to your potential customers, that you can do that. It's precise, it's special, I mean, that's certain.
An increased perception of value, definitely, Mike.
Yeah, exactly.
Etched in stone.
Yeah.
Speaking of B2B to B2C, I mean, for your customers, do you usually recommend, approaching other businesses versus end users, like, people like walking through from the street? Or what kind of advice, or maybe percentages, B2B versus B2C? For those who don't know, B2B is business to business versus business to consumer. So end users, people walking down from the street wanting something to engrave, like for one thing, versus, partnering with a different business and approaching them. What would you guys say to that?
Well, B2B customers, I generally talk about, like, we're talking about versus print. So we're talking about printed labels versus engraved labels.
Well, for example, like if it's in the wedding industry, right? If you're a laser engraver, do you approach the wedding planner that has, or do you approach the end user, the final bride and groom, in that sort of sense?
Depends on your model that you're working with, right? So
yeah,
I mean, some people put a lot of money into doing an Amazon site or an Etsy site, so they're looking to sell directly to the customer. Where again, if you're looking more to be a job shop and maybe taking a little less margin, then maybe you can go through somebody that like a wedding advisor or something. And the problem, the problem with that scenario is you lose control of the sale, right? I mean, that's always the biggest problem. Now you're allowing somebody else to go out and take and get the sale, and you lose your margin, but you also lose control over making sure the customer understands what they're going to get, right? So that's always a problem when you're working with somebody else. You have to educate that person to educate the customer that are buying the product, right? So there's good points and bad points between everything. So if you're dealing with the end user, you're asking for the appropriate information, you're setting the expectations properly, right? You're not allowing somebody else to do something like that, right? So it's always a bit of a plus. There's always good points and bad points to either model, right? So
well, you don't want to do both, right? Because if you're B2B and then you wanted to do B2C, then you're competing against your customers, right? So my opinion is really just pick the business model that you want and stick to it.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. We have I think this is regarding weirdest things. James, I remember you talked about a guitar pick that you've done for. Was it
thousands.
Some famous person?
Joe Walsh, actually, back when I had an engraving shop years and years ago, got approached by Joe Walsh from the Eagles and ended up producing. He does picks for every one of his concerts that he gives away ever since the 70s. Wow. And I did 2 of his tours with stainless steel guitar picks. And there's a long story behind that I'm not going to get into, but it was pretty fascinating chatting with Joe and getting to meet him. So that was pretty cool.
Awesome. Roland is asking, what is the best way to clean a metal plate after cutting an MDF or plywood on a honeycomb? Any liquid like lens cleaner? So yeah, we actually covered that in the beginning of the webinar. If you want to go back and kind of look, that was the first question that we covered quite in detail. So we mentioned oven cleaners and steel greasers that could help in that situation. So I'd recommend to just go back a little bit and you can rewatch it afterwards. We have a question from Vasu. India Trotec CO2 laser cutting. Yes, we have Trotecs representing in India. So if you go to troteclaser.com and go to the contact page, there's all the Trotec locations around the world, and then you can find the contact details for India. We offer, Laser Tattoo asks, we offer laser engravings as theft protection in the B2B area.
That's more of a comment from our last one. That basically this is something that they offer to their B&B customers. I would imagine.
So what kind of theft protection, Stefan? I think if you want to elaborate a little bit on that, we can come back to that question. Question, are there any updates for Rayjet Manager? I believe there was. Yes, Stephen, do you know recent updates for?
For the Rayjet 500, there has been. Now, the one for the 50, Mike, I'm not too sure now if that's been launched externally yet. I know internally it's available, but it's not ready yet. But for the Rayjet 500, yes, there is an update available.
There is an update for the R500, yeah. The Rayjet is gone out, I don't believe yet.
Yeah, the R500, if you're in the 10 or the early 11s, there is an update available, but not for the Rayjet 50 as yet.
Perfect. And Matt, if you want to touch base with the Trotec in your local area, they can answer that for you. Next question. We got about 10 minutes left to go. This one's from Lorenzo out of Stouffville, Ontario. Can air assist be adjusted on the fly while laser is working? And if not, can an external valve be put onto the side of the unit so we don't have to keep opening the side panel? It's quite a technical question.
They must have a 300 or a 100.
They have a Speedy 300 60 watt. Stephen, do you know?
Yeah, like a 400.
Well, no, especially on the fly. The only way you're going to manage that on the fly is going to be to have a master regulator in place and keep the valve on the. But this is if it's air assist and not gas assist. There's going to be no way, except for some modifications if you think you can do that, but not on those machines. Even on the 360, where there is a air assist valve on the y-axis on the gantry, that's not technically on the fly. You're still going to have to stop the machine to do that, right? So no, not on the fly.
My experience,
you're right.
You can put the gas assist line on as an option, and then you can control that gas line with the regulator. So when I hook up a gas line, but you need the gas kit to do that, and then you can actually adjust that on the fly. But that's the only way that I have seen to do that.
Yeah.
And then the gas kit actually replaces the onboard air. Lots of people don't understand that. Is that they get their gas kit, they put it in, and then now they're sad that they don't get to use their onboard air compressor as well. So you have to make that choice when you get the gas kit. But the gas kit is fantastic.
Yeah, you can hook the gas kit up to a regular compressor as well, so they can use their own shop air, and then hook it to also something like nitrogen. But that does give you at least the more control to adjust on the fly. That is the benefit of it.
Perfect.
There was one guy that I remember there was one guy that put a valve, he drilled a hole in the side of the 300 and put the control there, and so he could do that. He could adjust it. So I know it's been done, but again, I'm sure that the techs don't want to hear us modify.
Yeah, well, you got to be careful, right? Any modifications like that pretty much void your warranty, right?
Yeah. So I mean, if you're outside of your warranty, then it's not such a big deal, right?
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Perfect. Next question is from Richard out of Sligo, Ireland. Capability of Flex 400 20 watt versus 50 watt fiber. What thickness of stainless steel will it cut? Who wants to answer that one?
I want to say no.
Well, I've actually cut stainless steel with mine with a 20 watt with no problem, but I'm talking shim stock type material, foil thicknesses. Exactly. 1 to 2 mils of material. That's about it.
And how many passes? How many passes? How long did it take you to cut?
Oh, just one pass. It cut actually quite nice. But again, we're foil thicknesses, literally like the thickness of an aluminum foil. So,
Yeah.
it's called shim stock on stainless steel. That is possible with those wattages in one pass. It cut nice. I didn't have too much burr, but that was about it. Practical cutting of stainless steel is just not possible.
No.
And shim stock, unless you're doing like shielding or something like this customer, there's really not many practical applications for that thickness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the thing to remember on the fiber laser, and I'm Steven's here, so hopefully I'm saying this right. The peak power is the same on a 20 watt versus a 50 watt. No difference in peak power. Really, you can pulse the machine more, right? So it's not exponential like you have with a 30 watt CO2 versus a 60 watt CO2.
Yeah.
Right. So, it's not exponential. So it's always been, go ahead, Stephen.
No, go ahead. It's fine.
No, I'm just going to say, typically the problem we find, you can't move that head fast enough. I think that's the big problem on a gantry system versus a galvo system. So, and again, as Dave said, once you start to get into anything thicker than foil, then it just becomes not a good application. So,
yeah, we've had better, not the best, but better results on the galvos because you can scan at that higher speed. But
and multiple
limits of
very quickly.
Exactly. With a mechanically steered machine, no. It's, as Dave said.
Plus, there's a repeatability too, right? Is there not repeatability issues too? Maybe on a blotter system versus
on the new ones, it's not as bad. The 360 and 400, but the old 400, the 300, 100, the motor system isn't as repeatable for that kind of cut. For an engraving or for a cutting on plastic, it's phenomenal. But for that kind of a cut that you need the exact same beam and then the exact same place, the 360 and the new 400 can do it. It's just that it's just not practical.
Yeah.
And I before we change questions here, though, as I understand it, and Stephen, you can correct me or any one of you, of course. As I understand it, the 20 watt and the 50 watt at 20,000 hertz output the same power, but with the 50 watt, you can actually output the same power at 50,000 hertz as you can a 20 watt at 20,000 hertz. Is that do I understand that correctly?
I'm not too sure, James. Because also there's been two versions of that RPG laser. There's the V1 and the V2, and they changed some of the characteristics of that tube. But I don't want to comment on that. I'm not too sure about that aspect of that. Maybe Dave.
I've not come across that. No,
the way it's been explained to me was that was 1 kilojoule was the output power on all those systems, and as James said, all you can, because the problem is when you increase the hertz of your machine, it's like, I always say, it's kind of like flicking your light really fast. You never really see the light get on to a full power by the time you're turning it off.
Yeah, so and that's why I say between the two, the V1 and the V2, I think the V2 and subsequent versions of the RPG, they fixed that up, or at least made it work better. I think, and it only rings a bell. I'm not saying it's necessarily the same thing you're talking about, but there were some, I wouldn't call issues, but there were some characteristics on the first RPG tubes that were different. So that may be it. But as I say, I haven't read that or heard about that at all. No.
In doing some testing with the galvos, it sort of it correlates to that, where I take a 20 watt galvo and a 50 watt galvo, run them both at the exact same speed at 20,000 hertz, and they seem to cut the same. But when I put the 50 watt up to 50,000 hertz, it cuts much better. So I don't know.
It'd be interesting to compare software too with 4.1 versus 3.8. And actually see what differences are made there, because the development team, I'm sure, put a lot of optimizations in the software too. And then again, now you throw MOPA into the mix, and then things change again.
Yeah, exactly.
So if I can follow up with that, why would a person want 50 watt fiber versus 20 watt fiber on a
well, there is a speed. There is some speed on marking, right? Because you can now pulse the laser faster. Yeah. So you can run faster, right? You
increase pulse control.
So
that's the
so
biggest.
Your wave. Yeah, I mean, the problem when you that's always the problem. That's why we always say to cut wood at 1,000 hertz, because that allows the laser to get to its peak power before you tell it to turn off and come back down to its resting state, right? So when you go to 2,500, 3,000, you may not get to the top of your peak, right? You may only get to here. So you're not, you're going faster this way, but you're not getting to your maximum power, right? So that's what you need to understand on the hertz, right? Is that you allowed to get to here before you come back down, and the 50 watt gives you the ability to get more power at a faster pulse rate, right, Stephen? I mean,
yeah. Now, just to answer on 20 verse 50, the big thing there is you're going to notice a substantial difference when you are annealing.
Annealing, yeah.
Annealing.
Okay.
So if your application is going to be annealing, that's where 50 is going to be light and day difference, day and night difference between the two. So if annealing is going to be the application, I'd certainly recommend 50 watt.
Yeah, ultimately allows you to control the heat, and a higher wattage will, especially on annealing, you get much more heat build up in the material from the pulse control, and therefore we can anneal quicker, because that's what it requires, a lot more heat to do so.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, we're just over the 1 hour mark. I think we'll end it there. I just wanted to say a big thank you to Dave Stevens, our special guest. Please come back anytime. It was really great to have you here. I think you have a lot of knowledge in lasers. Yeah. It'll be great to have you down the line in the future. I just wanted to show you guys, if you want to check out all of Dave's work, if you type in Trotec USA on YouTube, go to their Trotec USA channel, and then you can find all the videos of the great hacks laser hacks that Dave is presenting. So lots and lots of great videos. So just wanted to give a shout out as well. And thank you so much for joining us. Any last words?
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Lev. It was a pleasure to talk with all you folks out there in Canada and around the world. And we'll have to do this again sometime later.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Thanks so much, guys.
My pleasure.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.